Welcome to the Past Life Awakening Institute podcast. I'm Mark Beal, a past life regression therapist and trainer. Each episode shines a light on healers who practice spiritual regression therapies like hypnosis and hypnotherapy with regression to this life, past lives, between lives, and spirit releasement therapy. If you're interested in having personal sessions or certification training in any of these modalities, go to my pastlifeawakeninginstitute.com website for details. So thanks for watching and enjoy this episode. Welcome, Victoria. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here today.
Great. So I'll do an introduction so people can understand about you. So this is Victoria Amador. She's from Florida in West Palm Beach. She's a QHHT practitioner. She also does BQH, past life regression, soul regression, and between lives. I've known her as a graduate of my very advanced Spirit Releasement Therapy training process through my Past Life Awakening Institute. So she just graduated, and so you can find her at the her main website is the Soul Healing Tribe, soulhealingtribe.com. She's a graduate of Cornell University, and she's been a founder, CEO, and business owner, including in hospitality and in a Dominican Vegan restaurant. She was born in the Dominican Republic, and she's been in the US for 25 years. That's right, isn't it?
I'll take that. It's better than the real number.
What is a bit long? A bit more? Okay, a long time. Okay, so she's fluent in Spanish and English. And with all that business background, she offers coaching sessions for small business owners. She also has an Etsy store where she has spirit guide posters, notebooks, journals, t-shirts. It's Healing with Vic at Etsy. She's got a YouTube channel, which is I Am Witch Angel. I Am Witch Angel at YouTube, which goes into a lot of spiritual awakening and advanced spiritual regression topics. She's also a High Priestess in the 21 Divisions, which is a Dominican spirit-orientated religion. And she's created the Awakening the Healer Within program, which is a one-year program for those looking to heal, fully awaken, and ascend. And so you can find that at awakeningthehealerwithin trainingprogram.com. So today we're going to hear about Victoria's healing path and about the people that she works with. So welcome again, Victoria. A lot of background, a lot of interesting things to touch on.
Yeah, I think you did amazing with the intro, so I'm not sure where to start. Like you mentioned, I am a 21 Divisions High Priestess. Something that I wasn't ready for when I was younger. I used to see different disembodied energy beings, and it was very traumatizing. I went through a very challenging childhood because I didn't want to admit that I could see those things because I was afraid of being hospitalized. I was afraid of being called crazy. So, of course, I did my best to prevent anyone from knowing. And I was able to see people that were getting ready to transition before they transition. So it was very depressive. I think it's important for the healers to know it is okay for the healers to also receive healing. Because I think sometimes we get into our head that, oh my God, I'm supposed to know it all. Anyways, so 21 Division is an ancestral magical religious practice where, similar to the ancient symbols, the oracles of ancient times of Babylon and Rome and Greece, they will divine and they will heal by doing certain things. It is the same thing that we do in 21 Divisions in order to help people that are in ceremony or in a consultation. The 21 Division is a practice that incorporates all of our background, from Africans, the Tainos that were in the island, and also the Catholics. And we work with any of those divisions to do different type of jobs, depending on what is needed for the person. In ceremonies, we are receiving a very powerful energy being that is coming through us to do the work. So we're just the vehicle. Through us, they do what they need to do to help others who are in consultation or ceremony. It's a lot of connection to the ancestors, a lot of respect to nature and things of the afterlife and so on. So it really is a beautiful practice. And I just want to clear that up because I know a lot of people are going to be thinking, oh my God, what is going on with this person?
Yeah, like I find it quite interesting in that within the world and the history of humanity, spirits are a big part of many cultures. Yeah. And so the Dominican Republic is one of those in Africa. But this is something that occurs throughout almost every religion or part of the world. There's a Gnostic part of a lot of religions, and a lot of that does then get into spirits. It's the same in Thailand, where I'm based. So there is a historical basis. We are now bringing this into the modern world in which we take a therapeutic approach. And then there's also the way people perceive it. So just before we started, we're talking about the word 21 divisions. Another word for that is voodoo. And then voodoo comes with all sorts of connotations. But you mentioned to me voodoo, it just means spirit, and I made the connection that in the work, that therapeutic work I do, hypnosis, like voodoo, has a lot of connotations. Some of them are negative, but hypnosis got into trouble in terms of its perception through a lot of dumb movies in the 1960s that were sort of sensational and kind of silly, and voodoo, much the same. And so I think the way that people understand words, hypnosis isn't an occult thing where some weird guy in a beard, says you're under my command. And voodoo isn't, putting a hex on people and like, that's it. All of these very reductionist ways, and hypnosis to some degree has managed to climb out of that. You either can change the name by calling something NLP or, rebranding it, and avoiding the word, or just changing the way people understand it. So you did mention, and this is something as well that a lot of practitioners go through, you have in your young life an awareness of certain abilities. And that's even part of the question. If I teach, and a lot of people do QHHT or hypnotherapy or past life regression, what would make them then progress and learn spirit releasement therapy? And for a lot of people, they don't have to. They've got no calling to do it. It doesn't come up in their clients, and it hasn't really come up in their life much. But for people like you, me, and probably a lot of people watching, there are little things. Oh, there were some things when I was younger and I maybe suppressed it, or there are some things that have come up again more recently and I'm having to deal with. I didn't really want it. I didn't invite it. I was quite happy living a conventional life and everything's going well. Why do I get drawn into this? What was it that led you to QHHT and SRT?
When I was small, a child, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to, it never went away. I just pushed it to the side because of the fears of being different, of being potentially crazy. And eventually I moved to a house that was next to the cemetery, and I didn't know it was a cemetery. I thought it was a park. And when I moved to the house, and everybody would think, oh my God, she's crazy. How did she not know it was a cemetery? It was so beautiful. It looked like a park. So I'm saying to my son, let's go. He was tiny. And I said, I'm going to go take him to the park. And when I get to the gate, it's a cemetery. And I started freaking out, like, oh, no. I cannot deal with this, because whenever I used to go by the cemetery, I would see so many different beings. So anyways, that's when everything started coming back really, really strong, to the point that I was cleaning the house often. Like, we got to clean this house. We have ghosts here. The lights were going on and off. The door was being left open. And it was just, I was like, if I don't get a handle on this, I'm going to go crazy for real, because it was too much. And that was them trying to tell me, you got to get this down. Like, you just put it to the side so long that it was time to start again. Going through everything that I was supposed to do in order to get to this point. I started some of those initiations, and I started really paying attention to my dreams and going into deep meditation in order for me to get what I needed to get. So it was a lot of reflection and contemplation, meditation, and also learning from some of the elders and understanding why this was happening, why I was being mounted, why I was going through the experience of seeing different beings and communicating with them and receiving lessons from them. So
what age were you when this was happening?
29, 30.
Were you still in the Dominican Republic then?
No. I was here. I was in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you hadn't been initiated as a high priestess in the 21
I was in Dominican Republic. I went to Dominican Republic to do it.
Okay. At what age?
30, 33, 34.
Okay, interesting.
And yeah. And honestly, it's been recent, because if you think about it, in order for you to get to an age where you really understand what's going on in that realm here, it takes a lot of years. So it's been 10, 11 years for me. And to me, it's like a baby. I'm still learning. And even my elders tell me the same thing. Sometimes they ask me things and I'm like, they're still learning. There is an exchange, a mutual exchange. So it's, I'm still a baby.
Sure. Well, I mean, one observation is it's very nice for you to be born into, to have elders and to be born into a tradition of the lineage. So you can think, what's happening? Am I going crazy? This is weird things that are happening to me. And for some people, there's no lineage, no tradition, nothing that really makes any sense to them. But for you to be, and so then I would say, in terms of between lives regression, which you practice, like we know you would have chosen to incarnate into a particular body, into a particular culture, and to have some of those resources around.
You're right. Well, when we were little, I used to go to some of these ceremonies for fun because they will play the drums and it becomes like a community thing to do. And it's a beautiful thing. The feeling and everything is beautiful. But for me to be the one mounted, I was like, no. This is for poor people. And I didn't want to be poor. So I was like, I pushed that a long time because of the urge in me to be a business person, to be successful, and had these self-limiting beliefs that people that did that, they were normally, I mean, honestly, 99.9 of them are very of love means they're very poor.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that for myself. So it took me a lot of the things that pushed that away. It wasn't anything else but my belief that if I did that, I was going to end up poor. And I fought very hard to get out of poverty. So to me, it was like taking a step back.
Yeah, I think that kind of prejudice or that kind of association is pretty prevalent, overall. So we can look at, it's nice to come from a tradition of spirituality, but we can also think of that as implicitly, backward, elder, we've evolved beyond that. Now we know science, so we can leave behind all those things. But there's a lot of ancient wisdom that we leave behind at our peril. And it is nice to be able to connect with, but it is also nice that we are living in a modern world and to be able to adapt to that. So how did that eventually lead on to doing therapeutic modalities and particularly QHHT? What age were you when you qualified in that?
I started doing consultations and ceremonies first before I found QHHT. And QHHT, I just found it over a year ago. I had 2 years ago, I had a dream with Dolores Canning. I didn't know who she was, so I Googled her, and I found her books and got immersed into it. But the reason why I really went forward with it is because I was consulting for people that every month they wanted to do something else for the same thing that we had worked on because they went back to the same behaviors. And I said to myself, something is wrong here. There is no way I'm going to be able to put up with these people because I'm going to have to call them off. I was getting upset with them because they didn't want to do the work to understand that they had to change in order for them not to make the same mistakes again. So every month or so, the same person will come back with the same request. And I'm like, but what didn't you understand that you had to change in order for you not to have to request the same thing? So it was very triggering for me because I'm like, if I make the same mistake, why wouldn't I go through the reflection to fix the problem? In their mind, it was just easier to go to a priest or priestess to fix the problem for them. And that trigger led me down to reflecting what in me, what am I seeing in them that is triggering me? And then I went through the process of going through my dreams journal and all of that stuff and saying, you know what, I think I need to change. I don't think I can do this and do it successfully because I'm going to end up being very angry with these people for no helping themselves to realize that there are ways to change. We cannot depend on magic. And for a savior to come and save us, we have to do it ourselves. So that's how I found QHHT. And I fell in love with it. I really did. I fell in love with it because when we're channeling information, and as a channeler, in your mind, you go through this process of tapping into other dimensions and realms, and and it's the same process. And I love the fact that in Dominican for those that are in 21 divisions or voodoo, there is this connotation that you have to be born as a caballo de misterio, meaning a channeler that can allow these entities to come through you in order for them to heal and help others. And I always believe that we all can do that. So I'm one of those, the black sheep of the 21 divisions entire family that says, oh, no, I think everybody can do it. So I never fit in to the different 21 divisions group because I will bring things up that were against what everybody believes. And I realize it's because I don't believe that only one person is supposed to come and do this. And I believe that we all can be our own healers. And that's how I found QHHT. And I just really fell in love with the results that I was seeing in people.
Okay, so you literally hadn't heard of Dolores Cannon, but you had a dream of her enough to even catch her name or something like that?
I did. I got her whole name. I'm like, who is this woman?
Okay.
I thought it was me in another life.
Okay. Okay. And then what really resonated with you? So for those that don't know, QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique, and that is it's a one session in person past life regression modality. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's all about getting to the point where we go into the past lives to get the messages about what is not working here now. And then we go into the process of calling the higher self, the subconscious, so that the higher self really is the healer and provides the answer and the healing that the person needs. It's a beautiful modality. And the power in it is so simple, but it's so powerful. And I've seen it with my own eyes. So eventually, though, when I started doing QHHT, the very first week, I found a client. She didn't know my background in any shamanic stuff at all. She didn't even know that I could call in energies or anything like that. And she goes into her session, and we make it to a point where there is an angel that comes through, and it was a beautiful feeling. Like I remember feeling that feeling of this angel. And the angel tells me through her, there is an entity that needs to be removed that was causing issues since age 18. And she told me her story. She was dealing with panic attacks since age 18. She was hospitalized twice. And she's been dealing with these panic attacks and depression since that age. She's 35 at that point. So for 17 years, she's been dealing with this. The client didn't know that I had any ways of helping her besides quantum healing. And the only reason why she did it is because her mother made her do it. So she didn't even want to do the session. And the angel says, there is an entity and you have to help her release. So I'm thinking immediately, now I got to go into my shamanic stuff to help release this thing. And I had to do a combination of both. And the entity eventually was released. I mean, if I tell you the whole story, it sounds like a movie, but the entity gets released. 4 months later, she sends me an email to tell me that she's off medication. She basically is happy and dating, that she hasn't been dating for all these years. And I'm like, what? So this really worked. And in the second week, there was another gentleman that also had a spirit attachment. And we dealt with it. I continued the whole process, but I wasn't thinking it really worked until that woman reached out to tell me that it worked. That's when I really believe. I'm like, oh my God, there is something here. There is a way to do the release without having to go into a trance style shamanic practice to release these entities.
Right.
So that's how I found SRT.
Right. So can I just jump in there? So it's kind of interesting that you're doing QHHT, but have you released entities prior to that in the years prior?
Yes, but not in QHHT.
Sure. But how often had you done entity release in
every time we had a session? Every time we had sessions, there will I don't know. If I have to give a number, I will say 80% of the time, there is often very hardcore entities. I'm not talking about little ones that just want to go. Those are easy. You can release those quickly. I'm talking about hardcore entities that are so much part of the personality that they do not want to go, and they have to forcibly be taken out.
Okay, and so this is you would call that like a 21 divisions session or a ceremony?
Shamanic session.
Okay, and is that 21 divisions still?
Yeah, it's a combination of both.
Okay,
The shamanic and the other stuff that I do that I cannot
well, actually,
go into.
I'm just trying to like be quite precise in that. So the 21 divisions, would that include spirit releasement?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And so did you find any difference in the kind of entities that were coming up when you're doing shamanic work versus QHHT?
Yes, the difference is, and with the session of that specific first time client, where we did a combination of both, because there was no way this entity was going anywhere. So it was a very aggressive session in terms of what needed to be done to remove the entity. But what I found fascinating is that the more that I analyzed the difference between the shamanic and the QHHT sessions, SRT sessions, what I'm finding is a lot of the times the shamanic spirits that are attached, those spirits are not necessarily, they're not ready to go anywhere. They're not going anywhere unless the right shaman or medicine person, healer, is taking care of that spirit forcibly. When we think about what happens in SRT, we have a combination of some of those entities, but most of those entities are easier to help them understand, you have to go. So there is a difference, and we call it in spiritism, we have people that are mediums, in English, how do you call this? Recogedores, mediums that will go around and they will pick up entities that need to go in transition, right? When we have people like that, some of these spirits that are in the auric field or impregnated in the people's physical etheric body, some of those spirits cannot be released because they got attached and now they don't know how to release, but they are ready to move on. They're regretful spirits. That's what we call it.
Okay,
those spirits are easier.
Okay, can I come back to the different types of spirits, but just to like get this background clear. So 80% of the time you'd have something coming out when you're doing shamanic rituals. How many of those rituals would you have done across? And this is over the last 10 years, or?
Yeah, it's
and how many? 100?
I don't know. It's been a lot. Like we go into ceremony for the purpose of releasing this entity.
Okay. Doing QHHT for the last couple of years, what percentage of QHHT clients would you find have entities?
Oh, I think I told you that I found that it's about 70% of them, they do have, and it's hard to put a number. That's why I'm being hesitant to give a number, because I haven't done the math, but truly, I find it completely irresponsible of me not to go through the process of learning to do proper releasement in a therapeutic practice, because I didn't want to do the shamanic stuff because it took too long for me to recover from those sessions.
Right. Okay. So we'll back it up a little bit, and so I'll come back to this as well. But just as a basis, so what Victoria's talking about here is, all throughout all of this, she's got a background and is born into a culture in the Dominican Republic, and has mentors to guide her through that. And she then picked up these therapeutic tools in the last couple of years, particularly like QHHT, and then and so what I teach, I've just for the record, I've never done QHHT training. I come from the school of hypnotherapy that then leads to past life regression, which is very similar to QHHT in some way, in many ways, although we'd often have 3 to 5 sessions, but we're still, they're both past life regression modalities. And from there, what we find is, let's say if you're a hypnotherapist, maybe 10-20% of your clients may spontaneously go into past life regression. And in order for that to happen, you probably have to have a previous connection to past lives. For a lot of hypnotherapists, they would, they'll do 1,000 sessions and have one go into a past life. For me, it was 10-20%. And then once you do past life regression, you might find 5-10-20% of your people have a spirit entity attached. But again, you have to have a precondition or a karmic connection to spirit releasement therapy, which I did, but to a degree where I, maybe it's not actually strangely the majority of my practice, but for 15 years it was a smaller percentage. And so in Victoria's case, she has a really strong karmic connection to entities, and she has, through past lives, I would say. And then, would you agree with that? Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's got a very strong this life connection. So the numbers that she's talking about, the percentages of entities that are attached to her clients is a lot higher than most people, but she has a lot more background. And the other thing I find is, like, now I would say 70% of my clients are pure SRT clients. Even though I'm the Past Life Awakening Institute, I'm getting mainly SRT. The reason for that is because this is a rarefied skill. And so if you're a QHHT person or a hypnotherapist thinking, well, I barely get past life, SRT sounds, just a tiny fraction of anything, then so we really see what we're able to see or ready to see. And in that case where you've got the woman who came for a QHHT session, but she was guided by her mother, but also by her spirit guides to you specifically. She could have chosen many people, but they're drawn to you because you have that unique set of skills. So for you to have a really high percentage of people with entities, that does not mean that 80% of people who go for QHHT sessions have entities, but other QHHT practitioners are not seeing them. It's simply that, that that for them, they may think, well, this isn't really a real thing because it never happened to me and I've done 1,000 sessions. You can have 1,000 QHHT clients or past life clients that never have it because you're really not interested in it, don't have a background or the skills. But then what happens with someone like Victoria is she's got, a ton of natural talent, a ton of past experience and ability. So she gets thrown in the deep end. So tell us a bit about how you came to think, oh, okay, I do connect and resonate with some of the SRT, and how you contacted me probably 6 months ago, something like that. And we started working together.
It feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was going through, like I said, I had a lot of clients that I noticed they had spirit attachments. Some of them I couldn't tell them because I didn't feel that it was the appropriate thing to do at the beginning, because they didn't come to me for that. They didn't come to me for the shamanic. They didn't come to me for spirit releasement. They came mostly for QHHT or past life regression. So
can I just jump in for a second? I think it's a really good and important point. And so that's one thing I do tell people who are interested in SRT. Like if someone gives you a mandate to do QHHT and an entity comes up, some in QHHT, they might say, well, that's not really part of our modality. We'd prefer, not to do that. I'd say perfectly fine. I agree with you 100%.
Well, I felt responsible.
But I'll tell you why and how to do it. And so the same thing can be for me in a past life regression session. If somebody doesn't know anything about SRT or spirits, they don't tell me that their issue is spirits. They tell me they want to go into a past life. And if while I'm doing that, an entity comes up, I might get some of the information from it, who are you, what's going on. But then I'd say, okay, go back in your box. This is a past life regression session. It's not SRT. I'm going to give this person what they asked for, not what they didn't ask for. And I will continue on. And so in the QHHT, you could do the same. So I'm not advocating if an entity comes up, you must drop what you're doing in QHHT and start doing spirit releasement. I would say follow the rules. And so I've got a process where, like if you're doing past life regression, do that. If they want to come back and set an intention to do an SRT session later, cool. But particularly if you're doing something like QHHT as well, or anything really, like just follow the instructions as given and don't get distracted. But if the instructions are, the spirit guide says this is part of what they were called here to do, and they can consent to it and set that intention in session, that may be another thing. But I just want to make that clear as well, which is
I think you're right. If the people don't have the training, they shouldn't even try, right? Because it could make things worse. But in QHHT, we apply to the idea that the client that comes because the higher self have found the practitioner to have the skills that they need to address the issues that they have. So
Sure.
I did feel responsible. And
well, that's one of the questions I'd even ask, though. Even if it comes up, I'd say, okay, that's interesting, but is that something we need to focus on today, or is that something we can deal with later?
Right.
And they could, and so I'd give them that chance at least to not do it. So I'm not here to sell SRT to every person that comes up, or to discard what I was doing and get distracted by it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the reason why I think that people should, those that are QHHT practitioners should look into SRT as a training modality is because a lot of the issues, what I found is that with QHHT clients, they will have the one session initially, and 2 weeks later or something like that, they will say, I felt great, I felt this, but something is still there. And that's how I started figuring out that something was really needed more than just QHHT. And the combination of doing SRT before even doing QHHT has been very powerful for a lot of my clients.
Yeah. Okay. And so just to set a framework as well, I think a key part, even a question might be, if you're doing a QHHT session or a past life regression session and entities come up, to me, that doesn't mean you have to address them in that moment. So I just want to make that clear. And so one thing, it can be like, they've got an attachment, I've got to release it, I've got to help them. No, you don't. They've had that attachment, they could have had it for decades. Just because it comes up now doesn't mean you have to do it now. You should do what you set out to do, which is a QHHT session. And for me, I would just say get the message from it. Now, the message might be you do have to deal with it right now, and if that's the message, fine. But really find out what the real message is, because the message could be this: we want you to understand that entities exist. We want you to we want you to deal with them maybe next week. If you've got the ability to do that through your past training. It could be that you do QHHT sessions, you notice entities come up, I tell them to, hold their horses and wait. But it happened a few times. So since it's happened a few times, I think I'm going to have to find out what this is. And maybe I'll start doing some training and get some, get some advanced training from someone like me. And then this happens a number of times where people will say, look, exactly that. I've had entities come up, 4 or 5 times. I've done 100 sessions of QHHT this year. 4 or 5 times entities come up. I've told all of them to just, I didn't know how to deal with it, or I just told them to wait or just sort of let it be. And a lot of times entities are not a big deal or a big problem. They're not really negatively affecting their life. Therefore, you don't have to deal with them urgently. But all of it is just like a little whisper that the universe is giving that, sooner or later, you can start learning SRT. And then you can just gather up all those clients that you've known over the last couple of years and say, notice how that thing came up, and if is that something you're interested in, and then you can do sessions with them, years down the line. So that's one thing, that you don't have to feel a great urgency, but there definitely will be times for other people where it comes up and you need to work with it sooner rather than later. But that's just sort of another. I'm just this is not necessarily Victoria's. It's not Victoria's experience, but it can be the experience of a lot of other people doing regression or QHHT therapy. But Victoria's got a lot more background and skill, therefore she would have been, triggered to work with it straight away. So the fact that, your first people in the first week and the second week are coming up, that's a lot more than would be usual. Therefore, you're being asked by the universe to, to get into it, sooner rather than later.
But I do want to say, because I have to say this.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the entity doesn't come and say, I'm here. A lot of the time it's the spirit guides that are coming through, appearing as a spirit guide, and it's something else.
Okay.
So you see how the training is needed for people to be more responsible, because we're taking care of people. We are helping people. We have to be responsible.
Well, that's a great question. I was just about to ask you this question. Do you even know the kind of entities that you're getting? And so oftentimes, just for those that don't know, Spirit Releasement Therapy, for me, there are the main entities we work with are spirit guides, who are, to me, it's a one guide who progresses through a number of lives with the client. The client has they're with them in this life. They've been with them in past lives. They were with them in the between lives, helping them decide in which one to reincarnate to. So I'm not talking about spirit guides. or guiding spirits. I'm talking about your spirit guide who has one specific role, has known you for millennia, and is nothing more than that. And so it's not, getting advice from a bunch of entities. It's a spirit guide who has a very specific and connected to you, almost like a higher self. In a sense, you could see it as well. So spirit guides are a big one. Then earthbound spirits and dark force entities. So earthbound spirits used to have a body, and often, human, and dark force entities didn't. And they're deceptive, they're lying, they're often in service of the darkness, and they're out to deceive and to make trouble and to prevent people from living their life purpose. And often that life purpose is the people that we see, being a healer or being a healed, healthy person. And so what Victoria is talking about here is, so there are three main types of entities. So I'll be interested on your take on that. But the first thing to notice here is the kind of spirit guides she's talking about. And spirit guides come up in past life regression and QHHT, and they're very helpful. And they're often used as being, a key part of the session. And what Victoria's alluding to here, and it becomes a real problem, is if your spirit guide is actually a dark force entity. Because dark force entities lie, they deceive, and they can present themselves as being a spirit guide, but they're not. And then that can contaminate the session and cause
healing that can be received.
Exactly, and can block it and create all sorts of problems. And so, and that this probably isn't that common. I would say, again, maybe Victoria is just her numbers are a lot higher than average, but I would say this is kind of 5 or 10% of the time that this could happen, and you certainly need to watch out for it. Most of the time, the majority of entities are pretty minor earthbound spirits who are just sort of a bit lost and confused, and you help them find themselves and get some clarity and move along. And then you can have dark force entities who are also kind of lost and confused, and it's not that hard as well. And then you can have dark force entities that are really out there to F with you and to really create havoc and to have a bit of a brawl with you, to be little fighters and create problems. And the kind of ones that are going out of their way to deceive and to impersonate spirit guides are going to be the ones that require advanced spirit releasement. So a lot of times, even the way that I teach it, simple spirit releasement can be done in 5-10 minutes. You can so again, if you're doing QHHT or past life regression, a lot of times, an entity comes up. Do I need to derail the session that I'm doing and stop not doing past life regression or QHHT? Well, if it's just a matter of doing something for 5 minutes, you're lost. You're an earthbound spirit. You missed going to the light. You do a little regression and send them on their way in 5-10 minutes, and then you can get back to the core modality, what you're intended to do, and no harm done. It's only 5-10 minutes. In fact, you're able to do a bit of SRT in it, but it's still essentially a past life regression or QHHT session, and you haven't gone off track. But what I'm talking about is when you notice that there's a significant and that actually is their main presenting issue and the main cause of their problems. Then you can embark on a session of spirit releasement sessions that can be 3 to 5 sessions of an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's not a 5-10, it can be a 5 or 10 minute thing, SRT, but it is often a 6, 8, 10, 12 hour in session process. So how have you noticed that sort of that range of entities?
So I do find that after I started taking SRT seriously, like, this actually works. I don't have to sacrifice and do so much to remove a spirit that is basically ready to go at the end of the day. Even though they might look like they're not, you can quickly enough help them understand so that they can transition. And again, in Spiritism, we call those regretful spirits. So they're ready. They just need help.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, these spirits are stuck. They cannot go until you transition. So they don't know how to release after they attach.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And even part of the releasement processes that are historically used often are quite directive and commanding. Like, I command you to release exorcisms, which is Catholic and the Catholic, which is then as part of the 21 divisions, or even things like in the name of Jesus I command you to be released, this kind of thing. And so the spirit releasement therapy doesn't really do that. We're just like, hey, dude, what are you doing? You look a bit lost, you look a bit confused, or you're coming at me, and so we're really about discussing with them, getting a narrative, getting information, not really telling them what to do, but just saying, asking them questions. And then they come up with answers, and you're like, well, okay, given that answer, that means you have more freedom of choice than you might have thought. And they're like, oh, I suppose I do. Well, what choice would you make? Then they make the choice to release themselves rather than being told what to do. And the same, so that can happen for earthbounds and dark forces. So how would you is that a fair characterization, or how would you consider some of the distinctions or differences between some of the shamanic release or?
Well, like I said, we tend to be very assertive with these different, especially the ones that are more from the low astral planes. We tend to just hardcore send them without any communication whatsoever, because they're not there to negotiate. They're hardcore. Now, the ones that are regretful, then those are the ones that we're more kind to. In SRT, we're kind to all of them. So it's been a transition phase for me.
Okay. Yeah. I think dig deep enough and they're all regretful, And so by regret, and so some of them know that they've been tricked. And so that's the big part of what we see with DFEs. So this dark force entity Victoria is talking about, it's trying to trick you by pretending to be a spirit guide. And then so there are two things that happen. Firstly, they succeed, and you don't know why your sessions didn't go that well. And you thought you did a good job, and you thought you talked to the spirit guide, but you didn't realize you were being tricked. You were tricked, but you didn't know you were tricked. And then what can happen is, if you are able to understand that you've been tricked, you can say, DFE, you tried to trick me by playing the spirit guide, but you couldn't. So you tried to deceive me, but you're a deceiver, but I was not deceived. And the same way that you would try to deceive me, but it failed, you in fact have been deceived yourself. The reason you're pretending to be a spirit guide and then messing with this person and making their life tricky, you've been deceived into acting as an agent for somebody that's you think you have a contract with, that you think you have to do the work of a dark master, and if you don't, you'll be punished, you'll be in trouble, all of that. And so we don't even necessarily have to tell them, get out of here. We can just say, understand, and then once they've been revealed, they may then start attacking us.
Right.
So they try to pretend that they're not a DFE and a spirit guide. Once you find them, and so you're tricked and you don't know you're tricked. Once you say, oh, you haven't tricked me, they'll say, well, instead of trying to deceive you, they may try and scare you. So those entities are like, I've been sent by Lucifer, and in fact, I am the dark one and the devil himself, and I'm going to mess with my client. And since you're trying to help them, I'm going to mess with you as well. Then they'll try and create fear on us. So there are two main methods: deception, lies, and fear. And so I would then say to them, you try to deceive me, it didn't work. Now you've switched tactics. Now you're trying to make fear in me, and that's not working either. Because fear is just not understanding reality. And I know the reality is you are working according to a contract that you don't have to, because you've been lied to and because you're afraid of the dark master. So they are really falling into their own trap. And so and then a lot of the work we do, this can take, a long time in discussion. You have long conversations to get them there, but to have them not be deceived by their master, their own self-deception, and not to be afraid of that one. And so they appear not regretful, because it's like, I love darkness and I love messing with people, and the devil's powerful and great and he's much better than you guys. So they appear not regretful. But once you get into it and they realize, I've been deceived, I didn't have to do that, I've got a contract which lasts forever, and they're also afraid, I'm doing this because ultimately if I don't do it, I'm going to be punished. And so there's a fear there. And so that once we can get them through their own fears and deceptions, then ultimately they feel regret that I was afraid, that I was deceived. So for me, we're nice to all of them because they're all basically regretful. Some of them are obviously regretful. Some of them are eventually regretful. Either way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so was that something that you found that, and a lot of people do find, I already do, releasement and work with entities, but they do it in another technique, which is requires a lot of energy. And so the way I do it, it does feel like pretty lighthearted. I think there's a lot of patience, persistence, bit of calmness and clarity to work through in conversation with entities and bring, to demonstrate a lack of fear on the part of the therapist, me and you, and to show a lot of clarity. And so is that something that, and so what's caused you to seek out, SRT as well? Were you finding it a bit tiring? You just wanted to figure out some other tools and yeah. So how did you find picking up SRT after your previous?
Well, because I meditate so much, I was tapping into next level type of information about how some of the things that we do, because that's what our ancestors did. Sometimes we do it following the lineage, following the guidelines, but there is another way to accomplish the same result.
Yep.
For example, when we go into some of these trances, sometimes it will take me a couple of days to recover. So I couldn't go back into the next day into a regular session, QHHT or whatever session, because I was completely out. My body was recovering. Even with 21 divisions type of sessions where we go into a ceremony and we start channeling spirits, those spirits, they have such a power. Their energy is so high that this physical body cannot handle it so well. So it takes time for the physical body to recover. And sometimes even when I was doing like, oh my goodness, I was able to recover in one day, I was still recovering for one full day. It wasn't, I didn't have the way to be done and that's it.
How do you feel now with spirit releasement therapy? Do you find any recovery process needed or?
No, I honestly don't. It might be a 15, 30 minutes type of recovery where I go into balancing myself and coming back to myself, but it's no intense where I have to spend days or a day or days recovering from whatever I was doing. And just to clarify, there are different ways to pick up these entities with tools that are given to a specific type of let's call them elders, because I don't want to call them witch and then people think they're doing black magic, but basically that's what they are brujo or bruja, and they have different tools that have been fundamentado. They have been worked on with different things, magical symbols and things to quickly pick up the entity. Those entities have to basically be ready to go. If they're attached to your personality, you just don't pick them up like that. You have to go through a different process. And that's when we get into the deep shamanic stuff. So I'm not talking about simple release with witch magic, where you might have a mirror with different symbols that are going to pick up those entities, and that's it. But those entities normally are just in the auric body. They're not part of your personality. So once they get into your personality, then you have to go through a deeper process, and that's what I'm talking about. Just to clarify that.
That's a really good distinction. So I think we need to be really clear. There are some entities who are pretty random and they have no real intention, and they're just kind of lost and don't know what they're doing. There are other entities who pursue people. They connect to them for decades and they influence them to the degree that the person, and you're talking about the personality, like they do shape the personality so that if you release them, they're not quite sure, who they are without that influence. And so a big part of what we have to do in these complex ones that can go on, 3, 5, 7, 9 sessions can be ongoing therapy of not just releasing the entity, but helping integrate and ground and reconnect a person with who they truly are. Because just as an entity can impersonate a spirit guide, it's almost as if they impersonate part of the inner voice of the client. And that person kind of thinks the entity is them, and that they're, and this is often where people will come to me. They'll start to say, I've started to realize that the thoughts I was having were not mine. And they might even say I had maybe some racist thoughts, or I had some destructive thoughts or some divisive thoughts. And I realize I'm not really that kind of person. But what does that mean? It's like, I'm not that kind of person before, but I've been that kind of person for the last 3 or 5 years. And I want to go back to what I was. And so we can discuss, but then they also have to deal with the consequences of that, because now they're perceived by other people as that person who, goes on these rants or has made certain decisions and done certain behaviors that they are now very regretful of. And so that causes them pain and suffering to know. So some of my SRT clients, I've taken some of these actions, said some of these things, and or I'm in this location. They have to deal with the consequences of their actions, but knowing a lot of those actions were influenced by dark energies, and that's something that they now have. They've renounced the entity and can release it. But then they have to heal and really process and integrate and get back to the core of the decisions that they make beyond influence. So there's a huge distinction between a random thing that comes in and can be gone in 5 minutes, and something that might take 5, 7, 9 sessions.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so did you find any difference between, so I laid out the kind, a spirit guide, earthbound spirit, and dark force entity. I mean, we can get into ETs, might be another podcast, but let's just keep it on this. In fact, it will be. But let's just keep it on those three for a while. So is that something that is recognized, or that you'd see in the shamanic or Dominican traditions?
Yeah, we do deal with earthbound, those that are lost, that are trapped, and then the dark forces one, the demonic entities.
Okay, and the spirit
we
guides
don't recognize you will not find a lot of people in these traditions that will recognize the ETs.
Okay. Well, interesting. Yeah. So that is why it's another subject, because so I didn't really know that. That's interesting though. So just that is what we as therapeutic heat track practitioners focus on, those three ones, and that's also part of the this tradition of centuries, if not millennia, that's been practiced throughout Africa and the Caribbean. When people mention they're doing anything occult, I want to know that they've really got a lineage, that they've really got a good training, because you're born in the tradition, you've got elders that can guide you. Other people who go into the occult can often do so without guidance or with a bit of naivety, and because of that, they can go on with an intention to help and heal people. They may be trained, but they also, as they're releasing entities, may pick up entities that are themselves, and therefore end up with attachments that can create various levels of disturbance, from a bit of nuisance to a significant problem. And sometimes those people then do become clients of SRT. As you say, there's nothing actually particularly wrong with that or anything. In fact, it can be a really useful exercise. So a lot of people who do SRT have, prior to that, released their own entities themselves. So have you had experience yourself with how do you protect yourself, or how to deal with any entities while you're healing them as a therapist, you end up being a client or having to release them yourself?
Yeah, well, I have done both from the shamanic perspective and from doing my own sessions for myself after I take care of clients. What I find very interesting is that when I started meditating to pull some of the information about why we, specifically me, had an attached entity, a couple actually, that I didn't see before, because they were part of the younger childhood personality that was part of me, right?
Yeah.
So when I go into these sessions to help others, I wonder why my spirit team and my higher self didn't address this issue. And I go through the process of understanding. I had to learn about this issue on my own terms, because of the learnings and the teachings that were there for me, right? To understand why I ended up here for this SRT training and all of that stuff. But what I find interesting is that even when you go into shamanic readings to find out if there are entities, the entities can play with the tools that the medicine man, medicine woman, shaman, brujo, whoever it is, the healer is working with. And you will know, you will feel the disturbance, and there is something. And if you're very advanced, you will see, oh, there is an entity affecting the person, because something is happening with what you're doing, that you can feel the energy. If you're not very well trained, and even if you're well trained, what happens is if the entity doesn't come forward and it's already part of the person's personality, there is no way to detect it unless the person goes through the reflection process.
Okay.
And I mean, that's insane, because it's like you're telling me that a very 30, 40 years brujo, bruja, shaman, medicine man, medicine woman will know. And, you know, some of these people don't even believe, some of these medicine men, medicine woman, in related to ayahuasca or San Pedro, those sacred plant medicine, they don't believe in spirits. I'm talking about the brujos and brujas that do work with spirits, negative spirits, that understand that they are negative spirits, and they will not be able to identify by spirit attachment unless it comes forward and the reading or the spirits that are working with that person gives them the information that, oh, there is a spirit attached.
Yeah.
So it's very complex and convoluted how the information can or cannot come forward. But when the person starts reflecting on the things that they need to change, it is unavoidable that they will find the spirit, because they're dealing specifically with a thing that needs to be addressed. And when they start dealing with that, the spirit automatically shows up.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so a lot of times you can do sessions, and a lot of people, you work with people and not know that they have attachments, but you don't know. So it's not that 70% of your people have attachments, or 5% have attachments, but the percentage could be a lot higher. They've got attachments, you just never know about it. Because
Right.
there are little signs there and you don't pick up on them, or you just don't ask for it. So just in the same way that a DFE can disguise itself as a spirit guide, a lot of entities will sit in the background and not want to come up. They will hide or just not make themselves known.
Right.
And so in spirit releasement therapy, we have through the presenting issue or through previous experience and other sessions that we're now picking up where we left off, we can then scan through and identify them. But if you don't do that, if you don't look for them, you may not find them. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. They can be sitting in the background. So scanning through and identifying, and just because you find one, it's like, oh, we found it. Where there's one, there's many. And then know exactly what is it. Is it a random minor EB, Earthbound? Is it one that's been there for a long time? And so you were wanting to address, like why would you say, is this one of the reasons why spirit releasement therapy works from a priestess's perspective?
I really do believe it. In terms of what I can give you an example, as one of my initiations, one of the spirit entities that work with me showed up and basically almost stopped the ceremony, because the spirit was like, we're not doing this until this person addresses me and takes care of me, right?
Okay.
So of course I'm like, I'm already doing that. What else do you want? But this spirit basically almost stopped the ceremony, because this spirit felt that I wasn't taking care of the spirit the way that I should be taking care of the spirit. Anyways, my point is, these different spirits that we work with will help us understand what we need to get ready for. For example, if the elder that is taking care of the ceremony doesn't understand that this entity is part of my spirit team and gets freaked out because it's like, oh my God, what is this? We could be dealing with a potential disaster where the person is thinking, this is a dark spirit because he's stopping my ceremony. And it's nothing like that, right? But in some cases, the spirit that shows up is a spirit that needs to be released. Yeah. And a lot of people think, oh, if it shows up in a ceremony like this, it's because it's part of the spirit team. So there is some confusion there. I completely forgot how we got here. But my point is, when the person starts meditating and reflecting on the things that we need to work on, then it's easier for us to know there is something outside of me that is influencing me to do this. Yep. And we can take it back until we get to the origin in order for us to figure out how to release it and not make the same mistakes. Because what happens is a lot of people go into Ifa, Osha, Lukumi, they go into Muerterismo, Palero, or whatever, Voodoo, and they're looking for solutions. They do a sacrifice, they will do an offering, and then next month they're back to the same thing. The thing could get worse. because they are depending on something outside of themselves. They will be healing and release for some time, but the moment that they make the same mistake, they're back to square one, and they attract the same things that they attracted before. So you just did a sacrifice, or you just did an offering to different spirit beings to help you face the problem. But the moment that you make the same mistake, you're back to the same thing. So you haven't really solved the situation. So when we start reflecting and contemplating on what we need to do to become better people, that is, the way that I'm looking at this is the only way for us to really address and fully release, so that we can not attract the same things again. But when you go into magic work, or some of these ancestral spiritual practices, there is a priest and priestess that is going to save you with the spirit help. There is no responsibility on the person on, oh, I cannot do that again. And because there is no that responsibility, the person receives relief, but then goes back to the same thing, and it ends up being a cycle. And it just gets worse and worse.
A really key component of spirit releasement therapy is that it has its basis in hypnotherapy and then past lives into spirit releasement therapy. So within spirit releasement therapy, a key tenet is regress to the cause and fix it, which is basic regression hypnotherapy. And so it's not find an entity and command it to release. That's the last thing you do. In fact, by the time you've fixed the cause, the entity should release itself. You don't tell it what to do. You regress to the cause, fix the causes, and that by regressing to the cause, I mean regress the client to the cause of what the person is doing in their human life and fix that. And you can regress the entities, regress them to when they chose for the darkness, got a contract with the Dark Lord, when they passed away as an earthbound and didn't go to the light. So you regress your client and fix their issue. And that can be ongoing therapy that may take sessions after that. So but in this SRT itself, you can regress to the cause. You regress the entities themselves. And so that's even funny. Like, I'm trying to do a session for the human, but that's assuming that, the only thing that exists is this human. But at that point, they're now a synthesis of human and entity if they've been together for 30 years. And so the spirit is really part of them, and that spirit wants its session as well. And so you talk about regretful ones. There are a lot of entities, including dark forces, who they may be guiding you. In fact, they've said this to me, then it was like my mother made me go to the session, or my spirit guide made me go. I've had dark force entities encourage their host to go for sessions because they want to talk to me and get out of this bad deal they made with the devil, and through that, and regressing to the cause can meaning, whatever naive action that I did that invited entities, whatever emotion of real anger and hatred that I had towards my father or something, that a dark force entity then started feeding off my anger and hatred. And we really have to heal the relationship with the parents that you have as a human in this life, and that will enable you to be able to release the entity. And then and so that's a big distinction or a big addition I think SRT adds. And so with that, you do have to be quite well schooled in hypnotherapy to be able to regress entities and people into those past causes. And so what I find, once you do all of that, the whole, I command you to leave, like that's basically automatic. And if that's all you're doing, for me, that's really the cherry on top. But the cake is really, you got a cake, you got a cake. Because have a cherry or not doesn't matter. If you want to put a cherry on it, fine, tell them to go. A lot of times you don't have to. Not all cakes have cherries on them. So if people think releasement is like the cherry, it's like just not. It's a cake. You know what I mean? So so we've been talking about QHHT and how, and so you mentioned as well that while you're doing that, an entity can come up. So what's your view on, I don't really know much, honestly, about the QHHT community, the forums, the discussion boards, anything. Like, I know they exist, but I know so little about it. But I do know that entities like just for anyone who does any regression therapy, past life regression, whether it's QHHT or not, sooner or later, for whatever reason, usually if they have some specific background or some talent, entities may pop up to one degree or another. And as you say, most of the time they are pretty minor and you can just shoo them on your way, 5 minutes, and then that's it. Maybe, as many practitioners never have to deal with it. But some do, and then they go through this whole process. Is this against the rules? Am I going crazy? If they've never heard about it, when it first happened to me, I was like, I didn't even know it existed as a modality. Like you didn't know what QHHT was until you dreamed about Dolores.
Right.
And so even for those people, so what would you say to QHHT practitioners who are finding entities are coming up and in varying degrees?
I find in the forums that people are talking about SRT issues, but they don't know that they're talking about SRT issues. And unfortunately, I think there is neglect into, staying with one base as the only base and thinking that's it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful modality. It's truly powerful and beautiful. But I think to be responsible for those people that are finding or that are listening to this, because if they're listening to this, it's because they already know there is spirits and attachments. So
especially if they've listened this long.
Right. And so definitely they have to really take it seriously and be responsible. It's about the client.
Yeah.
And
Well, can I just ask, there are a couple of approaches that you could have. Like if you're a QHHT person, you find spirits are coming up, the first thing you could do is just like put them back in their box, put it on hold and get back to your session. But then afterwards you could refer it away. You could just say,
true.
like something come up, but even if the client at the end of it doesn't say anything and they don't really have any symptoms, I would say like it may not be a big deal. Why even bring it up? So even if I was a QHH person and I noticed an entity thing and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I put it in its box, and then I might not even say anything afterwards. If you want to do QHHT, nothing else, perfectly fine. And so like if you don't have to deal with it, cool. So that's my first thing. Like, what should a QHHT person do? I would say, like, if you don't have to do anything, then like feel free not to, even if they do have an attachment. But I would say if after a session a client says, "Whoa, something came up, and I want to know how to address that," then you got two options. One of them is refer it away. I know someone, I've heard about this SRT thing. If you want, talk to them. And oftentimes I'll be referred people and I go, like, it's not really a big deal. It doesn't really apply. You've misdiagnosed it, or they do have it, but it's not really, it's a small thing that they could do in something else, and you don't need SRT sessions. So it's another thing. So and sometimes it'll be okay. This has been brought up and we can do those sessions. The other thing is like if it's only happened to you once or twice, and then refer it away. Why bother getting into it? But if you are kind of interested in it and it happens a number of times, then that may, and then I'd also check with your own guides, your own guidance, and if there's some part of you that feels this is coming up for a reason, maybe I could do some more study and training in it, then you could do that and have that as a separate modality and get some training in it. So does that sound good to you?
Right. Absolutely. I think we just need to be more responsible.
Okay. And so what about, so let's say they can refer it away, they can get more training, but what about practitioners who are finding entities coming up to a certain degree? What would you advise people, in their sessions to do, how to deal with it?
I think taking a simple SRT training program for those that don't want to go into the rabbit hole is the most responsible thing to do, because after having so many clients identify a spirit guide that was not a spirit guide, it just really worries me that we might be helping the client think this spirit guide is my savior and I have to listen to this spirit guide, and it can really go down the dark hole. And that's why I'm saying we have to be responsible with the clients, because our commitment to the client is to help them and guide them. If I know that there is potential risk, I have to be responsible enough to say, okay, well, if I cannot address it, I have to refer someone. But if it's something simple, like identifying that the spirit guide is not really a spirit guide, I mean, that's mind-blowing to some people. Like, I have been worshiping this entity all this time, and it ends up being something that doesn't have my highest good.
So
And
what,
they have been tricked.
yeah, okay. So what would cause you to identify something as a spirit guide in disguise or trickster?
Well, we go through that using the SRT
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
Because when we go into a shamanic session, we see. But when the client goes into a QHHT, they are seeing. And we might tap into it as mediums and channelers, but we're not seeing all the details that they might be seeing, but we can feel the energy too.
What?
So when there is an energy that triggers me, you learn discernment after working with these things for a long time. So the moment that I feel something is off, I will be asking them things. Can you describe this, explain this, how does it feel, this and that? Eventually it reveals itself, and then we can address it properly. But if the person doesn't have the discernment, they have to have some type of SRT training, even if it's just the basic training.
Okay. Yeah. So I do have a basic training course on my website, the Past Life Awakening Institute. Very reasonable price. So that's a basic one. And so what kind of indicators would there be though? Is that where like a QHHT practitioner, they're talking to a spirit guide and they start to feel something's a bit off? What other kind of markers might there be to note that that may be an issue?
Yeah, well, let me give you an example. I had a client, oh my goodness, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, and one of her spirit guides was this sort of ninja style spirit guide, and very sleek, and he was like a samurai, she called it, and he was her protector. And she invited him when she was going through a lot of sexual abuse.
Right.
And he showed up to protect her, but it became a very challenging relationship for both of them because he got tired. So, but he showed up as a spirit guide.
Yeah.
Because in her mind, he was a protector, and he was there for her highest good, but he was influenced by dark forces. So that's why I'm saying, and it keeps coming back to being responsible. We have to, if we don't know, if you don't have as a QH practitioner or past life regression therapist, you don't have the discernment abilities because you're not into this spirit realm like some of us are, then you have to have some sort of training to deal with spirits and identify how they feel, what are they saying, and you have to learn to read in between if you're not able to feel it, because if you can feel it, it's easier for you to say, okay, ask this and this and that. But if you don't have that, then you have to go through some type of basic training at least.
We mentioned at the top, you've got Awakening the Healer program. And so it's a year-long program you take people through. You take them through a number of spiritual regression sessions.
Yeah, so the Awakening the Healer within training program, and a lot of people think it's like, oh my God, I'm going to use my abilities and this and that. And it's about healing ourselves. Like we cannot help others until we heal ourselves. And that has been something that has been ingrained in me because I love the supernatural stuff. And I'm like, let's awaken everybody and tap into their abilities. And their Turians are like, no. We have to heal and be patient. So that's why it's a year program. There are 8 different sessions composed of a lot of quantum healing, beyond quantum healing, if it's online, between live regressions and also SRT, because what I found is that some of those clients also were dealing with SRT issues. But I also believe that not all of us are ready to deal with SRT issues because we're not really taking the different layers of what makes us who we are. Because we're spirits.
Yep.
Right? We are spirits incarnated in this human body. So by that definition, we are also spirits, and we're releasing the layers of our ancestors and what made us in past lives and other realities and so on. So through the year, the transition of the people and the healing and the changes is truly has been magical to experience that and to be part of that.
A couple of interesting things you said there. Like sometimes people aren't really ready to deal with SRT. And I think that's why sometimes we get like a little whisper and awareness about SRT, but that's why I'm also not in a big hurry to work with it. Like if they really need to do full sessions, like, you'll know about it. You don't have to like look for it and pursue it. And when we're healing the healer, one thing I've noticed doing SRT, that people who are going through a real awakening path and are wanting to go on the healer's path, that is at a number of people, it can happen that they have SRT issues because entities, dark force entities, might want to prevent them from becoming a powerful healer.
Right.
So that can even trigger and attract an increase in aggressive actions from entities. So like if you don't have to deal with SRT and it's not a big, there's no rush, but if you are on a real awakening path, then you may find that the more you awaken, the rougher things get in a way, because it's almost they are, and you'll find out doing SRT that they're actively trying to prevent people from becoming healers and to dislodge them from that path. So this is one thing that people may ask, in SRT, like I'm an awakening, I'm trying to be into the light. Why are things getting darker? Or why do I have to deal with these dark energies? And part of it is, and why is this happening to me? Is it crazy? And why do I have to learn through suffering and go through these things? But a lot of times, really awakening and really being a healer is about not sort of staying safe in a nice conventional world. It's about walking through the fire. And when things get rough, it's not about, is this getting dark and scary or a bit much? I'm going to run back to the conventional. It's about, or not getting stuck in the fire. It's about continuing to progress through it and making out the other end through the fire as a phoenix. So there is the dark night of the soul. There is the difficulties that are faced, but all of that makes you a better healer once you get through it. But it's very helpful for most healers to get assistance to really get to that high level of healing. You often have to go through a real, some sort of initiation, and often that is going through darkness. I mean, the Buddha, before his enlightenment, had all sorts of dark entities attacking him, trying to prevent him from becoming enlightened. This is on his last night. He remembered all of his past lives. So it's really, actually, this is really the key and why I do what I do. Because Buddhism for me is my basis, and the Buddha, he remembered his past lives, and he resisted Mara and the darkness that attacked him, and throughout the night. And by morning, he was peacefully saw the sun arise and was enlightened. But the just before becoming the fully realized being, he had to face all of those dark entities in a dark night. And so any healer will go through this kind of archetypal journey. And so I think it's really great that you're bringing in to this Awakening the Healer program. You're addressing and have the capability to deal with that. And to be honest, any program that doesn't deal with that isn't awakening people enough. To get to the real awakening, you're gonna have to get really light. You're gonna have to face some real darkness. And I think that we're being called to awaken more, and we're gonna have to be called then to understand and to skillfully deal with more darkness in order to be more light in the world. So that's a great thing that you're doing. So actually, there's actually a lot more I'd like to talk about and find out about your Awakening the Healer program. So I think that's something that we can break now and say thank you so much for this podcast. I'd love to have you back. And I know there's some case studies and some other things that you can add, and just to find out about the program you're running. I think it'd be really great for people to know. So if we can come back and do that on another podcast, would that be okay to do that pretty soon?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Great. Yeah. So fantastic.
What you're saying about the dark night, and what I have been told and it has been shown to me, is that there are multiple dark nights. And every time we think, oh my God, why am I going through this again?
Yep.
But we're shedding so much of the ancestors and past versions of who we were in order to get to that next level. And we're also recycling energy for the whole planet. So it can be very dark, but that's why we need the healers. We also need to have the mentors and other people that understand us, so that we can be able to go through those awakenings more gracefully.
Yeah. Okay. So I noticed you've got a beautiful picture behind you. And you mentioned the Arturians, and so we can get into ETs a bit. We've sort of put them on the back burner today. We can pick up on that next time as well. So a lot to look forward to. But yeah, wonderful to speak to you today, and so much more to talk about, and look forward to it. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
So just as a last shout out, we can make sure people can go people who are interested in doing QHHT sessions with you, people who want to do other sessions, past other sessions you offer, you can go to your website, the Soul Healing Tribe, and for your course, the Awakening the Healer Within training program.com. So the links will be in the descriptions below. And any other ways to contact you, social medias, anything else?
Those are the best way. My website has my calendar and everything else that they need, so they can reach out to me through email as well, and it's on the website.
Okay, fantastic. All right, great to see
Thank
you.
you
Thanks
so much, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening or watching. If you're interested in having personal sessions or certification training in hypnosis or hypnotherapy or regression to this life, past lives, between lives, or spirit releasement therapy, then visit my website, thepastlifeawakeninginstitute.com, for details. Thanks so much for watching or listening, and see you next time.